You've been slowly blinded since birth, and the architects of that blindness congratulated your parents at the hospital. The mechanism of your imprisonment isn't metaphorical, it's calcified, measurable, and sitting in the geometric center of your brain. Right now, as you process these words, there's a pine cone-shaped gland smaller than a grain of rice that was once called the seat of the soul by Descartes, the palace of consciousness in Vedic texts, and the throne of intuition in Egyptian mystery schools. It's called the pineal gland, and in over 90% of adults in industrialized nations, it's encrusted with calcium phosphate crystals, literally turned to stone. This isn't poetic language, this is medical fact. Autopsies reveal pineal glands so calcified they show up on CT scans like tumors, mistaken for brain lesions by radiologists unfamiliar with the epidemic. The average adult pineal gland contains more fluoride per gram than any other soft tissue in the body, including bones. It accumulates there like sediment at the bottom of a river, year after year, layer after layer, until the organ responsible for your connection to expanded states of consciousness becomes a crystallized fossil of what it once was. But here's what they don't tell you in those radiology reports. This calcification is reversible. Completely. The ancient Egyptians knew this. The Tibetan monks know this. And buried in declassified neurological research from the 1990s, Western science knows this too. There are compounds that dissolve these calcium deposits. There are practices that flush them from your system. There are 30-day protocols that can transform a calcified pineal gland from a dense, shrunken mass into a functioning, fluid-filled organ capable of producing the neurochemicals associated with dreams, visions, and states of consciousness that most people only access accidentally, if ever. The question isn't whether your third eye can reopen. The question is what you'll see when it does, and whether you're ready for your comfortable understanding of reality to shatter like the crystals currently imprisoning your perception. Because once the stone cracks and the light gets in, there's no returning to the person who believed that consensus reality was all there is. You're about to discover why you've been living in a reduced state of awareness your entire life, who benefited from that reduction, and exactly how to reverse it in the next 30 days. In 1944, the Journal of the American Dental Association published research that would quietly reshape human consciousness for the next 8 decades. Scientists discovered that sodium fluoride, a byproduct of aluminum and fertilizer manufacturing, could reduce dental cavities when added to public water supplies at concentrations of 1 part per million. It was hailed as a public health triumph. By 1950, fluoridation programs were expanding across America. By 1960, they were considered standard practice, and by 1970, nearly half the US population was drinking fluoridated water daily, with barely a whisper of controversy. What they didn't widely publicize was a secondary finding buried in subsequent neurological studies. Fluoride accumulates preferentially in the pineal gland at concentrations higher than anywhere else in the body, including bones and teeth. In 1997, researcher Jennifer Luke at the University of Surrey conducted the first comprehensive study on fluoride accumulation in the human pineal gland. She obtained pineal tissue from 11 cadavers and measured fluoride content using ion-selective electrodes. The results were published in Carey's research in 2001, and they were damning. The pineal glands contained an average of 9,000 parts per million of fluoride, levels comparable to or exceeding those found in severely fluorotic bones and teeth. Luke's research went further. She demonstrated in animal studies that fluoride not only accumulates in the pineal gland, but inhibits its ability to produce melatonin. Rats given fluoridated water showed a significant decrease in nighttime melatonin production and earlier onset of puberty, evidence that pineal function was being directly suppressed. Her work was published, briefly discussed in academic circles, then effectively ignored by public health policy. No major changes were made to fluoridation programs. No warnings were issued to pregnant women or children. The research simply disappeared into the archives, while 73% of Americans continued drinking fluoridated tap water every single day. Now here's where ancient wisdom and modern suppression converge into something you can't dismiss as coincidence. The pineal gland has been obsessively documented by every major spiritual tradition for thousands of years. The Egyptians depicted it as the Eye of Horus, and when you overlay the Eye of Horus symbol onto a sagittal cross-section of the human brain, it maps with anatomical precision onto the thalamus, corpus callosum, and pineal gland. The ancient symbol wasn't artistic abstraction, it was a neurological diagram. In Hindu tradition, the Ajna chakra, the sixth chakra, the third eye, is located at the exact position of the pineal gland in the center of the brain. It's described as the seat of intuition, clairvoyance, and direct perception beyond the five senses. The Buddhists call it the urna, the dot on the forehead, representing spiritual awakening. Descartes, the father of Western philosophy, called it the principal seat of the soul and believed it was the point of interaction between the physical body and consciousness itself. These weren't primitive superstitions, they were anatomical roadmaps to a function we've systematically disabled. And the agents of that disabling aren't conspiratorial villains in dark rooms making shadowy decisions. They're ordinary toxins you encounter daily, accumulating silently, invisibly, in the one organ responsible for your connection to non-ordinary states of awareness. Fluoride from tap water, toothpaste, and processed foods made with fluoridated water. Bromide from brominated vegetable oils in citrus-flavored sodas and sports drinks. From brominated flour in commercial baked goods. From fire retardants in furniture and carpets. Synthetic calcium from fortified foods and supplements that your body can't properly metabolize, so it deposits the excess in soft tissue, including your pineal gland. Chlorine from the steam you breathe in hot showers, absorbed through your skin and lungs. Heavy metals like aluminum from cookware, antiperspirants, and food additives. Mercury from dental amalgams and contaminated fish. Your third eye isn't mystically closed, it's chemically sealed, which means the key to opening it isn't faith or years of monastic discipline. It's biochemistry, it's detoxification. It's the systematic removal of calcifying agents and the introduction of decalcifying compounds that dissolve the crystal prison you didn't know you were living inside. And it can happen faster than you think, because the body wants this. The pineal gland wants to function. It's been trying to function your entire life, sending weak signals through layers of calcium phosphate crust, waiting for you to finally stop poisoning it long enough for it to remember what it was designed to do. The pineal gland is the only unpaired structure in the brain, a singular, symmetrical organ positioned at the exact geometric center of your skull, tucked between the two hemispheres, cradled by the thalamus. It sits in a tiny cave of bone called the pineal recess, bathed continuously in cerebrospinal fluid and shielded from the blood-brain barrier, in ways that make it uniquely vulnerable to circulating toxins. This vulnerability isn't a design flaw, it's a feature. The pineal gland needs access to everything flowing through your bloodstream because it's constantly sampling your biochemical state, adjusting hormone production in real time to keep you synchronized with natural cycles of light and dark, waking and sleeping, activity and rest. Unlike every other part of your brain, the pineal gland contains photoreceptor cells called pinealocytes, cells nearly identical to the rod and cone cells in your retinas. This isn't metaphorical similarity. It's structural, functional, biological sameness. Your pineal gland is, quite literally, an eye. But it's an eye that doesn't see light from the external world. It perceives light generated within, biophotons emitted by your cells, electromagnetic frequencies produced by neural activity, and possibly forms of information we don't yet have instruments sensitive enough to measure. In darkness, the pineal gland produces melatonin, the hormone most people associate with sleep. But melatonin is far more than a sedative. It's the master regulator of your circadian rhythm, the invisible clock that governs every biological process in your body. It modulates immune function, controls body temperature, regulates blood pressure, and coordinates the release of dozens of other hormones throughout the night. Without adequate melatonin production, your body loses its sense of time. You experience that constant low-level fatigue, the feeling of being slightly out of sync with the world, never fully rested no matter how much you sleep. But melatonin is only the beginning of what the pineal gland produces. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan proved what mystics have claimed for centuries. The pineal gland produces dimethyltryptamine, DMT, the most powerful naturally occurring psychedelic compound known to science. The study, published in the journal Biomedical Chromatography, detected DMT in the pineal glands of living rats at concentrations sufficient to produce psychoactive effects. The researchers confirmed that the pineal gland contains all the necessary enzymes and precursors to synthesize DMT, and that production increases dramatically during specific states: birth, death, deep meditation, and REM sleep. This is the neurochemical basis of dreaming, of near-death experiences, of spontaneous mystical states that occur without any external substances. Your brain is already producing the molecule that shamans have traveled to the Amazon to drink in ayahuasca ceremonies for thousands of years. You already have access to the chemical key that unlocks non-ordinary perception. It's being produced in the center of your brain right now, but in most people, it's being produced in trace amounts, barely enough to generate faint dreams, certainly not enough to pierce the veil of ordinary consciousness while you're awake. Now imagine trying to broadcast a radio signal through a layer of concrete. That's what's happening in your brain. The pineal gland is attempting to release melatonin and DMT into your cerebrospinal fluid, but the calcium phosphate crystals coating its surface create a barrier between the gland and the fluid, dramatically reducing how much hormone actually makes it into circulation. The crystals also physically constrain the gland, preventing it from swelling and increasing production the way it does in people with decalcified, healthy pineal glands. When researchers examine pineal glands during autopsy, they find that calcification begins as early as age 2 in some populations. By adolescence, visible calcification appears in roughly 40% of individuals. By age 17, that number jumps to 75%. And by adulthood, fewer than 10% of people in industrialized nations have pineal glands that are completely calcification-free. You're not dealing with a rare condition or genetic predisposition. You're dealing with a near-universal epidemic of neurological impairment that's been normalized because it affects almost everyone equally. Ancient yogis described this as the difference between waking sleep and true wakefulness. They said most humans walk through life in a dream state, perceiving only the grossest level of reality, blind to the subtle dimensions of energy, consciousness, and interconnection that are always present. They didn't attribute this blindness to moral failure or spiritual ignorance. They attributed it to blockage. Specifically, blockage of the Ajna chakra, the command center located at the pineal gland. Modern neuroscience calls it reduced pineal volume and functional capacity. Both traditions are describing the same prison, but here's the part that changes everything. The pineal gland can regenerate. It can soften, swell, and resume full function. The calcium can dissolve, the crystals can break apart, and be flushed from the brain through the glymphatic system, the waste clearance network that becomes highly active during deep sleep, washing metabolic debris out of brain tissue and into the lymphatic system for elimination. The monks didn't call it decalcification. They called it opening the divine eye. But the biological process is identical, and it begins not with prayer or belief, but with the immediate removal of 5 specific substances from your daily environment, and the introduction of 7 specific compounds that actively dissolve calcium deposits and restore pineal function. This isn't spiritual bypass. This isn't positive thinking. This is targeted neurological intervention based on documented biochemistry, and you can begin in the next 5 minutes. His name was Michael, 42 years old, a software engineer in Portland who'd spent 2 decades meditating inconsistently and feeling absolutely nothing. No visions, no intuitive downloads, no transcendent states, just 20 minutes of daily boredom, pretending to watch his breath, while his mind catalogued everything he needed to do that day. He'd tried guided meditations, silent retreats, breath work, plant medicine ceremonies. Nothing produced the shifts in consciousness he'd read about in books or heard described in podcasts. He'd resigned himself to being not wired for spirituality, convinced that some people had access to expanded states and others simply didn't. Then, during a routine physical for life insurance, his doctor noticed something unusual on an MRI that had been ordered for unrelated tension headaches. There, in the center of Michael's brain, was a small, bright white mass roughly the size and shape of a pea. The radiologist's report noted significant calcification of the pineal gland, atypical for patient age. The doctor dismissed it as benign, said it was surprisingly common, nothing to worry about. But Michael couldn't let it go. He fell into research papers, medical journals, ancient texts, biohacker forums, and he discovered something that made his entire spiritual search suddenly make sense in the most devastating way. Nearly every practice he'd been attempting for 20 years was designed to activate an organ he'd been chemically disabling 3 times a day. Fluoridated water in his morning coffee, brominated flour in his lunchtime sandwich, synthetic calcium carbonate in the multivitamin he took religiously every evening. He'd been trying to open a door while simultaneously welding it shut. Michael stopped all of it immediately. He installed a reverse osmosis filtration system under his kitchen sink with a remineralization stage to add back essential minerals while removing fluoride, chlorine, and heavy metals. He switched to glass-bottled spring water from a source he researched to confirm it was naturally low in fluoride. He eliminated all processed foods and began eating organic produce, wild-caught fish, and grass-fed meat. And he started consuming specific foods and supplements known to chelate, bind to and remove heavy metals and break down calcium deposits. Every morning, he blended raw cilantro, chlorella powder, and spirulina into a smoothie that tasted like swamp water, but contained 3 of the most powerful natural detoxifiers on the planet. Cilantro mobilizes mercury and lead from deep tissue. Chlorella binds to those metals in the digestive tract and escorts them out of the body. Spirulina supports the kidneys and liver during the detoxification process, preventing the metals from simply redistributing to other organs. He added nascent iodine drops to purified water twice daily. Iodine displaces both fluoride and bromide from receptors throughout the body, particularly in the thyroid and pineal gland, allowing them to be excreted through urine. He ate raw cacao, real cacao, not processed cocoa, which contains high levels of magnesium and antioxidants that support pineal function. He took boron supplements, a trace mineral that's been shown in studies to reduce fluoride levels in the blood and increase its excretion rate by 25%. He consumed raw apple cider vinegar diluted in water, which contains malic acid that breaks down calcium deposits throughout the body. And every night before bed, he practiced 20 minutes of complete darkness, no screens, no ambient light, curtains drawn, sleep mask on, to maximize natural melatonin production and give his pineal gland the signal to activate without artificial interference. The first 2 weeks, nothing changed except his dreams. They became vivid in a way he'd never experienced, full narratives with emotional depth, complex plots, characters he'd never met but somehow knew intimately. He'd wake up, and the dreams would linger for hours, more memorable than actual events from his day. By week 3, he started waking naturally at 3 a.m., not with the foggy insomnia he'd experienced in the past, but with crystal clear alertness. He'd lie there in the darkness, and instead of his mind racing with thoughts, there was just silence. Spacious, comfortable silence. In week 5, during his morning meditation, something shifted. He was sitting in his usual spot, eyes closed, doing nothing particularly special, when he became aware of a pressure between his eyebrows, a gentle pulsing sensation like a fingertip pressing against his forehead from the inside. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was almost magnetic, drawing his attention inward. And then, without any effort or intention, he saw light. Not the phosphenes you see when you press on your eyelids, but geometric patterns of deep indigo and violet, slowly rotating, fractal in their complexity, impossibly detailed. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He watched as the patterns gave way to what he could only describe as inner space, a vast, dark field that felt more real than the room he was sitting in. And in that space, there was awareness without thought, perception without interpretation, a sense of being connected to something immense that had been there all along, just behind the static. The experience lasted maybe 90 seconds before his analytical mind kicked in with 1,000 questions, and the vision dissolved. But those 90 seconds changed everything. Michael wasn't special. He wasn't naturally gifted or spiritually advanced. He had simply stopped poisoning the antenna. And the signal came flooding back, exactly as the ancient texts said it would. Not through years of disciplined practice or mystical intervention, but through basic biochemistry, removing the toxins, dissolving the calcification, and allowing the organ designed for expanded perception to finally do what it had been trying to do his entire life. Here's the truth that modern spirituality has forgotten. You're not trying to gain a new ability. You're recovering a stolen one. Every human being is born with a functioning pineal gland capable of producing endogenous DMT, regulating circadian rhythms, and, according to every ancient tradition that studied consciousness in depth, perceiving dimensions of reality beyond the 5 ordinary senses. This isn't mystical speculation, it's biological inheritance. And it's been systematically suppressed by environmental toxins introduced at scales that didn't exist before the Industrial Revolution. In 2013, Dr. Joe Dispenza's research team used quantitative electroencephalography to measure the brain states of advanced meditators during pineal activation practices. They placed 130 electrodes on subjects' scalps and tracked electrical activity across all regions of the brain in real time. What they found was extraordinary. During moments when subjects reported experiences of unity consciousness, expanded awareness, or inner light, their brains showed coherent gamma wave patterns, oscillations at 40 Hz, emanating specifically from the center of the brain where the pineal gland is located. Gamma waves are the fastest brainwave frequency, associated with heightened perception, information processing, and moments of insight. They're the signature of a brain that's functioning at its peak. And in these advanced meditators, the gamma wasn't scattered or localized to one region. It was coherent across the entire brain, as if the pineal gland was broadcasting a signal that synchronized all other neural activity into unified, high-frequency harmony. When they tested control groups, people with no meditation experience and documented pineal calcification, the gamma patterns were fragmented, weak, or completely absent. The hardware was still there, the wiring was intact. But the central broadcaster was coated in static, unable to generate the signal strong enough to create whole brain coherence. It was like trying to watch television with aluminum foil wrapped around the antenna. Then they did something remarkable. They took a subset of the control group and put them through a 90-day protocol of pineal detoxification, combined with specific meditation practices designed to increase blood flow and energy to the center of the brain. No pharmaceutical interventions, no invasive procedures, just dietary changes, supplement protocols, and daily practices. After 90 days, they measured the brain activity again. The gamma coherence in the formerly calcified group was indistinguishable from the advanced meditators. The third eye had reopened. The broadcaster had come back online. The pineal gland isn't a spiritual myth or a metaphysical concept that requires faith to validate. It's a biological broadcaster that you've been jamming with fluoride, bromide, and synthetic calcium since childhood. It's as real as your liver or your heart, with functions that can be measured, documented, and restored through targeted intervention. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the clear light of the void that appears at the moment of death. Modern studies on endogenous DMT production suggest this is the pineal gland's final broadcast, unimpeded by the dying body's biochemistry, releasing a flood of DMT that creates the tunnel of light, the life review, the sense of cosmic homecoming reported across cultures by people who've had near-death experiences. You don't have to wait until death to see that light. You don't have to have a near-death experience or consume psychedelic substances to access that state. You simply have to stop covering the lens. Remove the calcification, and the gland resumes its function as naturally as a plant turning toward the sun. The ancient yogis who sat in caves for decades weren't enduring some brutal spiritual ordeal to earn mystical visions. They were living in environments free from industrial toxins, drinking pure spring water, eating uncontaminated food, and spending hours daily in practices specifically designed to increase energy flow to the pineal gland. They were simply allowing the organ to function as designed. You have that same option. You live in a more toxic world, yes, but you also have access to knowledge they didn't. To chelating agents, to water filtration technology, to supplements that can accelerate decalcification in ways that would have taken them years. You can compress what used to require monastic isolation into a 30-day protocol executed in the middle of your ordinary life. Not because you're hacking your biology or forcing something unnatural, but because you're finally removing the unnatural interference and letting your biology remember what it's always known how to do. This isn't about becoming more spiritual or more enlightened. It's about becoming less obstructed. The visions, the intuitive hits, the sense of connection to something vast and intelligent, these aren't achievements you earn through worthiness or effort. They're the default state of a nervous system that isn't drowning in neurotoxins. Decalcify the pineal gland, and perception expands not because you've added something, but because you've finally stopped subtracting. You're not learning to see, you're remembering that you never stopped being able to. The veil between you and expanded perception isn't mystical. It's mineral. And minerals dissolve. Remember that feeling of blindness we started with, the sense that you've been living in a reduced state of awareness your entire life, and that somewhere in the center of your brain sits a calcified stone where a functioning organ should be? It wasn't metaphor. It was diagnosis. But now you know the architecture of your imprisonment, and you know the key is already in your hand. The external world hasn't shifted. Your job, your relationships, your responsibilities, they're all exactly as they were 30 minutes ago. But your relationship to them is about to fundamentally change. Because you're not broken, you're not spiritually deficient or neurologically incapable of expanded states. You're coated, you're covered. And the coating comes off with intention, time, and the simplest biochemical interventions: pure water, mineral-rich foods, darkness, and the patience to let your body remember what it was always designed to do. Here's what the next 30 days look like. Week 1 is about removal. You stop drinking tap water immediately, install a filter or switch to spring water from a verified low-fluoride source. You eliminate fluoridated toothpaste and replace it with fluoride-free alternatives, or make your own with baking soda and coconut oil. You remove processed foods, particularly anything containing brominated vegetable oil, enriched flour, or synthetic calcium. You stop using aluminum cookware and conventional antiperspirants. This isn't deprivation. This is simply closing the floodgates so the toxins stop accumulating faster than your body can clear them. Week 2, you add the decalcifiers. Raw cilantro, chlorella, and spirulina become daily staples.